going? I didn't ask you to. Okay, you can stay. Good. Let's call together. Okay.
Good morning. So we are in Parshat Vayeitze. My kids are here.
Obviously.
Daddy,
What?
I don't want
Come
to
here.
have it on.
Say hi.
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 Thank you.
Hi.
Can you go play? No. Okay, but can I teach? No. No. Okay.
We're in trouble now.
Well, I gave you guys the source sheet. Have a great morning.
Daddy.
What?
Daddy.
You want to learn Torah?
Daddy, yuck.
There's a one there.
No, yuck.
What am I looking at? This?
No, yet.
The smiley face?
Yet, what?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotta teach, okay?
No.
Then you can stay with me, but you gotta be quiet.
Okay.
Okay. So we are, let me share my screen with you. We are in Parshat Vayeitze, famously Jacob's ladder. And there's a very famous line that a few years ago, I read a Devar Torah by Rabbi Shmuel Hertzfeld, and he talked about how the description of the ladder, and you'll see that description is right here. V'hinei sulam. Sulam is the word that we use for ladder. It's probably much more accurately one of those old ziggurats that are like layered all the way up in like a pyramid shape. That's probably much closer to what a sulam is. But Jacob's ladder was the translation that took off, and so you have all these amazing images. But however you think of it, it was this structure that was firmly rooted, mutzav arza, like the Hebrew here is like as if it was going towards the ground, like it was so firmly rooted that it was still like planting itself in it. And then Virosho, its head, Magia, was arriving Hashemayma, towards the heavens. And Rabbi Hertzfeld a number of years ago said that this is how we should approach Judaism, that we should approach Judaism rooted in tradition, but dynamic and reaching towards the future. So I wanted to look at this verse. And every time I teach this verse, I try to, like, I wrote this Devar Torah this week for Truah that talks about this verse, and there was no way to work in that it was like in some ways in his name. So the rest of the time that I talk about it, I like to mention that that's the piece of Torah I really took from him. He's a modern Orthodox rabbi in DC, really wonderful guy. So with all that said, with all that like little intro, I would like to just read these verses. These are the very first 6 verses of Vayeitze. If you recall, Jacob runs away from home because of his tiff with Esau, and he tricks Isaac into getting the blessing and kind of extorts Esau into getting the birthright, and he fears for his life and runs away. So that's where we pick up the story. Will somebody read these verses either in your own Tanakh or here?
Okay, I'll read.
All good.
All right. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, and angels of God were going up and down on it. And Adonai was standing beside him, and he said, I am Adonai, the God of your father, Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying, I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely Adonai is in this place, and I did not know it.
So some of the most famous verses in Torah here. The ladder, the stairway, the ziggurat, the sulam, whatever we wanted to translate sulam as. This is an image that is in art everywhere. And also, God is in this place and I did not know it. Very famous line, made more famous by that book. I think there's a book by a rabbi who made the phrase even more widely known. Maybe it was Lawrence Kushner. I don't know. Bad things happen. Why do bad things happen to good people? I think he also wrote a book about this. So what do you make of this scene? Like, what are your reactions to it? What does it make you think of? What images of Jacob's ladder do you hold from your life or touch points that you have?
Well, this may not be where you want to be going with this passage, but I hear a lot of guilt.
How so?
Well, he just, as you said, extorted Isaac for his inheritance. And, you know, who wouldn't feel guilty for having done something like that? You know, I think it's his hope and his wish that God will forgive him. And that, I mean, this is a dream, so it's in his head. And, you know, dreams speak to our unconscious. And so, you know, I think he's feeling guilty. But that may not be where you want to go with that.
Doesn't this occur? It's not after he robs Esau of his birthright. It's he's on his way to get a wife.
No, so he leaves Beersheba right before here is both of the other things. So in Toldot, we have the theft.
Right. And then Isaac tells him to don't take a wife among the Hittites. Go.
So here, so he already stole the thing right before in Toldot, the end of Toldot. Isaac sent for Jacob and blessed him. You know.
But
Yeah,
Isaac
so the whole
run for a wife as well.
Here's Jacob went out to get like this, the beginning of him being like running away though in fear.
Yeah.
We haven't in this parsha this week, we read of Rachel and Leah.
Mm-hmm.
But he's running away out of fear of being killed. Look, like right here, this is the end of Toldot last week, towards the end of Toldot last week. I will kill my brother Jacob after our period of mourning is over. So Jacob, first thing, then comes here. This is the very beginning of the parsha. You can see the first Hebrew word here is Vayeitze, and runs.
Okay, but it's still after, maybe years after that incident. So that's still there.
No, it's not understood as years after that incident. It's understood as he's kind of fleeing. I can't talk right now, I'm teaching. Okay, well, then we'll clean up after, okay? Go for it.
Well, I wanted to actually comment on another part, not the stairway. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. And that's actually true. Like, that has come true, that descendants of Jacob have been spread out all over the earth. And the large part of the earth, maybe even a majority, literally bless themselves by his descendants, in particular, Jesus.
That's a nice Christian way to read it.
I think
we're the source.
I mean, you can call us the source, but Jews are also spread everywhere. There's no real, Judaism has touched everywhere.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Right.
I guess
Well,
you
it
could
doesn't-
say Jesus too, but I mean, that's not, I don't think that's, I mean, maybe that's how Christians read this text.
Well, that they bless themselves through us, and and that's the diaspora and the and Christianity spreading at least part of Judaism all over the world. I mean, they messed it up, but the idea is there.
I think I think when the text says the east and the west and the north and the south, it's basically restricting, it's basically considering the land of Israel, right? From the Mediterranean to the hills, from Egypt to Mesopotamia.
Well, I don't think they have a good sense of how big the earth is. But I'm not sure if there's boundaries on it.
Yeah.
It could be idiomatic. I mean, we can see what verse is it? 14. You can see how see if anybody explained it well.
Shall multiply.
It's just it's not really a good translation.
And he said similar things to Abraham, right? Is basically,
I mean, look at this commentary. This is before the Holocaust, but it's just kind of a remarkable. It's a remarkable commentary on the verse. Precisely when the Jewish people will have reached a seeming low point in their collective experience, like downtrodden by the Egyptian taskmasters, they will expand and become powerful in a measure never before seen on earth. That's that's a very prescient commentary to say that pre-Holocaust.
Well, but it's pre-Holocaust, but it's post
Enlightenment.
after the temple fell and and they were so defeated, and yet they had to find their way and create this new thing. So it was true then too.
but in what sense have Jews expanded to become powerful in a measure never before seen on earth?
Jews have a nuclear weapon.
Okay,
Many, a state of their own.
I see.
Jews oppress another people. They're so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. So some bad things about power, huh?
Oh my God, there's awful things about power. That power corrupts. I mean, the Tanakh over and over and over again. Do you see it warning against corruption? The prophets are exclusively about power, the corruption of power. And this is a really, I obviously didn't prepare this, so I didn't see this before, but this is a really for me, that's a really powerful commentary. There is no period in Jewish history where the Jews have had power as they have today. Like, not even close. Like, we can talk about the time where the temple stood and whatever, but we're talking about significantly fewer people. And we're talking about an ancient world, and we're talking about really small pickings in comparison to any other army, Rome or, Cyrus, or any of these things are much more grand than whatever the Israelite kingdom ever was. And there's a good chance that whatever it was is inflated in our narrative.
Sure.
So
Because
what Israel is today and what Jews have accomplished in America are just unprecedented in Jewish history.
Yeah.
I interpret it, I guess from my own interpretation, that the diaspora, the destruction of the temple had a purpose, that, stop us from being tied to this one place and to expand into the rest of the world. And that all the earth shall bless themselves by you, that fits in with my idea that our task, what we're chosen for, is to be an example and spread morality to the rest of the world. So, and that's what Jesus, and the early Christians at least tried to do, but then it got co-opted. But that's still the point, and it's still continued throughout the years with the other ones who I consider prophets, like Marx and Einstein.
Great. So if you look at what I'm sharing right now, if you look at, stop. No, you need to wait a second.
What's going on?
If you look at this text, this is a text of a rabbi talking about, stop talking. Bye. If you look at this text, it's a text of Rabbi David Einhorn, who's an early reformer and rather radical. And he teaches about Tisha B'Av, about this question, right along lines of what you're saying, David. That the Reform movement recognizes the decline of the sacrificial cult, of the priesthood, the state of Israel, like the old nation state, whatever, a wise divine revelation to all Israel, which, though seemingly appearing in conflict with the first one on Mount Horeb, actually is in close harmony with it. Reform recognizes in the flaming Temple Mount not a curtailment, but rather a continuation of the divine work of salvation, which begun on flaming Mount Sinai, marking the real beginning of the priestly mission, the conveyance of the divinity to all the children of this earth, for which Israel had been ordained at the Sinaitic choice. So in Reform thought, there's obviously people who in modern Reform Judaism it's different, and this idea never really caught on, but it certainly, when I read it for the first time, I immediately attached to it, and I've taught it endlessly since, because I think it's very, very much true that we can look at certain elements of our history and really learn from them. We can learn from negative periods, but also we can view it as a divine unraveling of the universe. And when we view it that way, this led to really beautiful things. Yes, this is one of the hardest things that we've ever experienced. And what's the what beautiful things also came out of it? And so David Einhorn says we shouldn't mourn. We should be looking at this as this is also God's plan. God's plan was giving us the 10 Commandments and the Torah, and also God's plan is dispersing us across the world. So,
and that fits in with your metaphor of the ladder to heaven too, that the temple, the animal sacrifice, all that, those are like the bottom rungs of this ladder, and we've passed that. So the idea is, some people want to go back, but that's going down the ladder. We need to go up. We need to grow towards heaven.
Nice. So that's a good thing to move us forward on. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to jump ahead just because of that comment. So we'll go back. I'm not going to skip all of them, but will somebody read this commentary? It's just, you can start at the vision.
And in his dream, there was a ladder standing toward the earth. The vision represented human beings who, though standing on earth, focus on the heavens. Man's understanding of the celestial regions and what they stand for is based on his service of the Lord. Genesis 28:12. And here the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. The vision reflects the fact that man's actions propel the movement of those angels, either heavenward or earthward. If man God forbid, instead of serving his creator, does the opposite. He's having a negative impact on those angels in the celestial spheres, causing them to descend spiritually. This concept has been spelled out in
The Sikta Rabbatai.
the Sikdat Rabbatai, where we are told that ever since the destruction of the temple, God reduced the number of angels constituting his entourage. However, once Yakov had become firmly established as a servant of God, he was granted an additional vision, i.e., I can't read the rest of it. And here the
Oh,
Lord
sorry.
himself was granted an additional vision. And here the Lord himself was standing above the ladder. The vision refers to the Merkava of God, his chariot. Who is this? Oh, Kedushat Levi.
A Hasidic rabbi, more recent. So I'm certain that there's theology in here we don't love, but I love the imagery. Like I find the imagery to be really beautiful. First, the idea that our actions either propel angels up or down this ladder was the thread that I was thinking of as you were saying at the end, David. But what do you think of this text?
Well, it's reading a lot into Jacob's ladder. I mean, it basically explains why the angels are going up and down the ladder. I think it's a really interesting idea.
It's actually contrary to some of the other commentary. I'm trying to find them now. I guess some of the older commentary where they're saying it was the angels who affect what happens here on earth rather than man. And at least he's saying it's people, humans, who affect what's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find.
Well, I mean, we do have like older midrashim about, like the angel is the one that stopped Abraham from sacrificing Isaac. That's not even midrash. That's in the Torah, right?
Oh, here it is. It's Ramban is saying that whatever is done on earth is affected by means of the angels, and everything is done by decree given to them by the Supreme One. So that's different from what this guy is saying, that no, this humans, our choice affects what happens. And, the angels are still the intermediary, but it comes from man rather than the angels or God.
Yeah, and we also have this part about the temple where there's less angels after the temple's destroyed. Or sorry, not less angels. There's less angels in God's entourage. I love the idea of God's entourage.
So when does Yakov become firmly established as a servant of God? Is that when he has this vision?
Funny that you say that. Where did I read this? There was a Devar Torah that I was reading this week about how there's parallelism between using God's language with Abraham and God's language with Jacob, like being a servant, that specific word. But I can't recall where I read it. It's the problem with having so much information at your fingertips. I never remember where it's actually from. It's like, oh, here's this little spark of illumination.
I think earlier in Genesis, there's some metaphor that, the Jews will become as numerous as the grains of sand.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And here it's like as, the dust of the earth. So it's kind of a similar metaphor.
Although it's different in the way that with dust, especially you live in a sandy or dusty place, it's a dry area. It literally spreads out in a way that you don't see sand or the stars that you talk about another time. It literally just spreads out through the air over wide swaths of area.
In a seemingly unpredictable way. Or there's so many, to unpredictable to the naked eye.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
And also at the whim of other external forces like wind.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So let's read this Rashi and let's talk about this situation.
And Jacob went out. It need have written simply, and Jacob went to Haran. Why then does it mention his departure from Beersheba, but it intends to tell us that the departure of a righteous person from his city makes an impression? As long as a righteous man is in his city, he is in its glory and splendor and beauty. When he leaves it, there departs also its glory, its splendor, and its beauty. This too is the meaning of Ruth 1:7, and she went forth out of the place, stated in reference to Naomi and Ruth.
So yeah, Ken, go for it.
Oops, you're muted.
Muted.
You're muted, Ken. We can't hear you.
Okay.
He doesn't know how to unmute it.
Oh, there you. Okay.
Can you
Now,
hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
You have to keep holding it down.
Since what, at this point of time, why is Jacob considered a righteous person?
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be my.
And I have trouble with him being a visionary. I know all the parshas talk about him being a visionary, but I don't see it.
I
So
think Laney's point was also is well taken. Like he's dreaming, he knows what he did, and he's having this dream of kind of being absolved of all the guilt and just being like, you're the chosen one.
Right.
And then the Torah makes it happen.
Uh-huh.
What are you gonna say, Jody?
just one thing that really struck me when we read the original passage was that he didn't just lie down and put his head on a rock. Okay, which I think hard pillows like that were probably a common way for people to sleep then. It's a rock of this place. The point of saying that. And so he puts his head on it and then he dreams. And then he comes to this connection and understanding about God that he didn't have before. And so maybe that's when it changes. Because he's like, oh, and he recognizes something.
surely the Lord is present in this place.
Right. Well, there's a sentence after that.
Hold it down. They can't hear you.
There's a
We
sentence
can. We
that
can.
it says, I saw the face of God and I still live.
In here in Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's the only place in the Torah, I think, where a man lives after seeing the face of God.
What verse is that?
Is it after God is in this place?
All right, after surely, well, my version is that he saw the face of God.
What verse does it say that?
It's after he wakes from
Hold it down.
the dream. It's after he wakes.
I know, but what verse is it?
I don't have the Torah,
Here.
the Tanakh with me.
Verses are over here.
So right here in 28:16, Jacob awakes from his dream.
Right.
There's no mention in the Hebrew of a face. And then here, how no mention of face here either.
Okay. Well,
So let's keep going. Let's see a little bit if we can
yeah.
find any.
Okay. I know I read it, but
I'll
that
get
could have been in the
yours
Parsha.
It's in the first part that we started with today.
It's where we started.
Yeah,
Where?
talked about,
Where do you see it?
I thought that's where it was, maybe.
Yeah.
was standing beside him. Okay. Let's see the face. Okay.
So is this kind of like a conversion for Jacob?
Well, we're not wrestling with the angel quite yet.
Okay.
He's still Jacob here. But
Because it says God is surely Adonai is in this place, and I didn't know it.
Right.
He has to find God within himself, and it's like,
well, I mean that was what one of the things I said is that it's so easy for us to not find God in our lives.
Mhm.
You know, it's so easy for them to not be.
This one doesn't have it.
It's so easy for us to have blinders to where we might find God, right? You look out at the world and it's so hard to see God. I find this to be one of the most relatable texts. God is in this place and I did not know. Of course, God is in every place. We just need to look, right? God was also in the concentration camps.
Mhm.
but for him, it's a revelation for him that, well, maybe there's a kernel of God in me and I can make it grow.
Is it that, or is it even just simply recognizing God in a place before he wrestles with all these other things? He comes to an understanding or is more open to something than he was before. You know?
He also, one way that we could read this was that, you know, traditionally we read the story as Isaac and Esau and Jacob and Rebecca and like favorites and whatever. These few verses are the first time Jacob is not under the auspices of his mom pulling the strings. He's figuring out life for himself now. You know, I don't want to be too mean to Rebecca because she's actually supposed to be one of the kindest people in the Torah. That's why Isaac marries her, you know, with the camels and the water and all that stuff. But we could view this transformation as one of leaving the nest, not just fleeing for your life. And we see him figuring out for himself what that looks like. And he becomes a whole new person. He wrestles with an angel. Who knows what that means? We can interpret that in a lot of ways, and ends up being called the one who wrestles with God. Perseveres with God.
Right.
But before you can wrestle with God, you have to begin to recognize that God's there and
He does.
start coming to terms. So maybe it's like step by step, and this is step one.
So he's wearing this halo.
I think more importantly, he's looking at other people with the halo.
Okay.
And seeing it down.
That's the transformation. I mean, well, I guess it depends where you're at. Sometimes we're in a place where we need to see ourselves with that holiness. We think so lowly of ourselves, and we need to understand our place, you know, and that we too are holy. And then other times we are way too judgmental and need to say, you know, they're doing their best and they're a holy being also. And sometimes they don't act in holy ways, but, you know, so if we're here for Jacob, he embodies like all of that, like the way we look at Jacob, the way Jacob acts, the way all of those things are questionable, and we see growth, and he's the one we're named after. So what does that say about everything? So let's read, actually, I don't want to read that one. Got 12 minutes. So just a nice little image here from Ibn Ezra, that the ladder hints at the highest soul and God's angels hint at wise thoughts. Just metaphor that I find particularly beautiful. And I find it more beautiful in the form of a ladder than a ziggurat, but that's just me. Will somebody read Rabbi Hertzfeld's teaching that I mentioned at the beginning?
I think he's talking about this.
Jacob's ladder, that part?
Yeah, go ahead,
Yes,
Jacob,
Arcadia.
Jacob's ladder is firm on the ground, but it is not resting on anything. It just keeps climbing toward heaven. It means that our faith must be rooted and grounded, but at the same time, it must be dynamic, soaring heavenward, rooted but not static, dynamic but not floating. Too rooted, and we run the risk of becoming stagnant. Too dynamic, and we become separated from our tradition. This image to me must be our anthem. We must be both rooted and dynamic. What is the kosher pig?
I'll put it in the chat. That's the Devar Torah or the sermon I was talking about. It is just like one of the greatest sermons I've ever read. It's about there's about a couple things. One, growing lab raised pork, can that be kosher? The way that Beyond Meat or any of those things are. And second, the answer should be yes, if they can do it without, you know what I mean? Like if it's actually not from a pig, then it should be okay. There's a second thing. There's this fantastical thing in rabbinic lore that if a cow gave birth to a pig, that pig would be kosher.
And all this.
But a cow gestating a pig is now scientifically possible.
Right.
So
Sure about that.
That's what she was kind.
So I highly encourage you to read that Devar Torah. It's on this week's Parsha, so please enjoy it. It's phenomenal Shabbos reading.
Okay.
So one thing that I wanted to add, I've taught this before, but I wanted to add a piece, another piece that I was thinking of as I was thinking about this image and Rabbi Hertzfeld, is this Talmudic paradigm of thinkers. So dynamic and rooted, right? That's how the ladder is described. And we have this Talmudic paradigm of thinkers of Sinai, as in Mount, which is, if you look here, one who is extremely knowledgeable. And then you have another one called an Oker Harim, a mountain uprooter, which is someone who's extremely incisive, pokes a lot of holes in all of your logic. And the Talmud argues which one's preferable, which one's better, the one who's forward thinking and pokes holes, or the one who knows everything and can firmly stay rooted in tradition. And while I encourage you to read this at some part if you're interested, I just want you to see my favorite Talmudic word at the end, heku. We're just going to let this stand. There's no answer. So, I'll just let you react to that.
I stand with the uprooter. I guess my tendency is the uprooter of mountains, the radical, which
Right.
literally means someone who gets to the root of a problem.
I think you need both. I don't think it works if you just have one or the other.
We need,
One on the other.
If you look in the story that they give us, okay, you know what? Let's just read the story because it's actually it's interesting. It talks it out for us. So the Talmud argues both sides. This one's preferable. This one's preferable, and then we'll start here. Can someone just read from here down?
anybody want to?
The Gemara relates that this is not merely a theoretical dispute. Rather, at one point, it had practical ramifications. Rav Yosef was Sinai. Rabbah was one who uproots mountains. They sent a message from Babylonia to their Eretz Yisrael, which takes precedence. They sent in response, Sinai is preferable, as the master said. Everyone requires the owner of the wheat, that is, one who is expert in the sources. And even so, Rav Yosef did not accept upon himself the appointment of head of the yeshiva. Rabbah reigned for 22 years, and then Rav Yosef reigned. The Gemara relates that in all those years that Rabbah presided, Rav Yosef did not even call a blood letter to his home. Rav Yosef did not assume even the slightest air of authority, in deference to Rabbah, and would go to seek out the blood letter rather than expecting that the blood letter would accommodate him. The Gemara relates, Abe Rava, Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Bar Matana were sitting and studying in a group and were in need of a head for their group. They said, let anyone who will say a matter that is not refuted, let anyone who will say a matter that is not refuted be the head. Everyone's statements were refuted, and the statement of Abaye was not refuted. Rabbi saw that Abaye raised his head. That is, he noticed that his statement was not refuted. Rabbah said to him, Naamani, calling Abaye by his name rather than by his nickname, begin and say your lecture. A dilemma was raised before the sages between Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Bar Rav Matana. Which of them is preferable? Rabbi Zera is incisive and raises pertinent difficulties, and Rabbi Bar Rav Matana is moderate and not so incisive. But ultimately, he draws the appropriate conclusions. What is the conclusion? Which is preferable? The Gemara concludes the dilemma shall stand unresolved.
They do that a lot, where they just
All
say
the time.
stand unresolved.
Mhm. Yep.
He draws
So,
it says he draws the appropriate conclusions. They're just not going to tell us what they are.
No, the conclusion is it should be unresolved.
Oh, I see.
What is a blood letter?
well, yeah.
Is this like leeches? Or is it
Blood letter. No, they would actually cut people.
There's like a belief in bloodletting was healthy for you, like was a healthy thing.
Goes into the 19th century. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to I'm trying to recall what its meaning is here. I think I usually cut it out, but because I added it to this source sheet,
Oh, I see. I was reading it as a letter, that you write of blood,
Oh,
but it's letting blood,
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
like the Saturday Night Live sketch, the barber letting blood for everything.
Wait, just like that.
Just trying to think what the benefit of it is in this context, though. That's the part that but it's okay. It's not really the point. I'll see if I can find it later. So Sinai,
Right.
Mutzav Arza, firmly rooted in the ground, or Oker Harim, Magia Shemaima, the one reaching for the heavens. Can you think of any examples of the two? Also, actually, let me just name this. Rabbi Neil was an Oker Harim. He was a huge mountain uprooter. He did stuff that is much more common now that nobody did when he did it. And he then turned into a Sinai. Right?
Life stages.
Maybe in some instances, yeah. But you've got your David Sackmans who just permanent Oker Harims.
When what it says about the blood letter, isn't it just more to show how he would not be presumptuous in any way and expect anyone to accommodate him? But even when like you're sick and the blood letter should be coming to you, he would go to them. He wouldn't assume anything. That maybe that's what that's about.
Yeah. That makes sense. When you study Talmud, the only thing you get is the bolded parts. So Rabbi Steinsaltz added all these not bolded parts so that we could read it. And without that, there's a lot of parts that are like
You have to be very creative when you study it.
You do. I mean, in some ways, it's cool. If you have the time to actually study Talmud, it's very cool. But it takes a lot of time to like get stumped and then brainstorm with the person in front of you when you've got a whole daf to get through. It's like, oh, bloodletter. We're gonna have to stand here for an hour to figure out what we're talking about here, or brainstorm or think about options. Any other thoughts about this paradigm as a whole or these ideas?
Back to your the stairway or ladder metaphor. I keep thinking stairway to heaven.
That's what it is.
And
I
she's
just saw-
buying a stairway to heaven.
That just hit its 50-year anniversary.
No way somebody wrote that song and didn't know this story.
Yeah.
Well, it was based mostly on Tolkien's writings, actually. It quotes almost verbatim from him. But here, I mean, another way to look at it is sort of there's, being rooted in tradition and then reaching for something else. And, in a sense, you need both. I mean, you can't, just like the ladder, you have to get from here to there. So I may have radical ideas about where we should go, but, getting there is the problem. And that's where you need the ladder. And it has to be rooted in where you came from. You can't start from some mythical place. You have to start from your heritage. And I think that's the problem some people have. I mean, this is a big thing in our family because we're so supposedly mixed. And people ask, especially the kids, what are you? Are you Black or are you Jewish? Like you have to decide. And it's not that way. That's your heritage. That's where you come from. You can't change that. That's where you start. But who you are is what you choose to be. I mean, this is where I came from, but as I find myself now making my choices to go this way or that way. It's
very much what you were talking about before. The rootedness has to be in the heritage and the knowledge and all that stuff. That's your base, would hold you firmly to the ground. But where are you going to go with that? That's the other part. That's the finding issues with this and having to build some structure from it that takes you to a place that resolves some of those issues or doesn't have them, or so it's kind of,
You have to be, the uprooter has to really understand the Sinai, or he'll never be able to bring the Sinai along with him.
Yeah.
Him or her.
There's another place in the Talmud that sometimes when this idea is talked about, there's a rabbinic pairing of Rebbe Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish is like a bandit, like outlaw turned Talmud scholar. And he's the Oker Harim, and Rebbe Yochanan is the Sinai. And when Reish Lakish dies, when Reish Lakish dies, Rebbe Yochanan is so upset, and his students come to console him and say, like, here are all the, like, basically just placating him, saying, like, these are all the things you've taught us. And Rebbe Yochanan's like, I don't want that. I want the person who's incisive, who pokes holes in my logic, who makes me better.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's an interesting thing to think about because it's a constant wrestling in the Jewish community. What is that? Usually my kids are very good when I just let them run around the synagogue, but who knows today?
he's back.
Yeah, Ken.
Before we finish, I found the where Jacob said, I saw the face of God and my life has been saved.
Yeah, where is that?
32:31.
32:31. Is that next week?
Genesis.
Yeah, but
What portion is that in?
32, it's in Vayishlach, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's next week.
It's, it's,
Oh, that's where his name is changed to Israel. So after that happens,
yeah,
that's what he says.
So
next week.
We wrestle.
let's see if I can find let me put the Hebrew here real quick. Where'd it go? Oh, here.
I've seen a divine being face to face.
Right, but so the only thing here, Ken, is that God, he doesn't wrestle God.
Right.
But he still names the place Panei El, like
It's interesting.
Panim El Panim or something like.
One of the parshas that you recommended us to read,
What?
one of the parshas. that you
What are the
recommend-
parshas?
The Parshas?
Not
It quotes-
This is the
quotes the
commentary.
our Torahs.
Well, for now, I encourage you to go read
The kosher.
where is it? The Kosher Pig. I'll put it back in the chat. And
Can I ask a stupid question?
no such
How do
thing.
when you put something in the chat and then we close out Zoom, how do you retrieve the chat?
You can't retrieve it. You would have to copy it and put it somewhere.
Okay. Okay,
Oh, you can copy and put it in a note, or you can just open it in your browser right now and then leave it there.
got it.
There
Thank
is
you.
a save chat option, which saves a text file of the chat to your, somewhere on your hard drive. It's always hard to find.
Oh, I never noticed that.
How do you say, where do you, I don't know.
I actually have access to all the chats because it saves them, but. All right,
does it
well, Shabbat
say?
Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat
Shalom.
shalom.
Enjoy the kosher pig and the warm weather.